So we're here today to talk about demographics and minorities within special education. My name is Ernest Hadrick. I am a graduate principal certification student at Cabrini University in the EDG 658 Special Education Administration Summer 2019, Summer 2 2019 course, which is led by Dr. Ranieri. Today, I brought a friend with me to discuss this topic, which for me is near and dear as a school counselor, talking about special education within minorities, especially as a black male. And I understand how we are often overrepresented in many school districts, in public school districts within this country, in special education because of numerous factors. But we want to dive into a little bit more on a local aspect for our districts here within Montgomery County. So before I get any further into that, I want to introduce my guest that I have today, Mr. Troy Swittenburg. I'm going to let you hear from him for a moment to hear about his reason why this is important to him.
Hi, my name is Troy Swittenburg. Grew up in Norristown Area School District throughout my early career. Moved to Owen J. Roberts School District, where now I have 3 kids that are going through the school district. One of the 3 has been placed in special education for speech therapy. I've seen both sides of the coin and how Santana is able to perform as being labeled as a special education student, and what the goals are for him to complete his special education to move him through. So that's why it's there. I just want to give you a little background on ourselves. He both of his parents are both college graduates of Syracuse University with 2 degrees. Medium income is above the state level. And I would say we're pretty much middle class, right in the middle, not lower middle, not high upper middle. But just pretty much middle class Americans. So I think this is a great topic that we're going to discuss today.
And that's big for you to be able to be transparent with your own situation for your own child, and to have the opportunity to speak on this today for other kids and other individuals who often don't have a voice. So without further ado, we'll get into it. Our mission today is to break down the local school district, which is the Norristown Area School District, and compare it to another one. I actually chose Wissahickon because I know that we often talk about income in certain areas in comparison to others and affluency, and say that, well, in certain areas, if there's a high income, usually special education is very low. And low income is high aspects of special education, or high numbers and percentage of special education. So when I thought about those scenarios, I said, well, let me find something that maybe matches in percentages. So we're going to break down, and you can look at your Norristown and your Wissahickon data that we received. We went online to the Penn Data website and got the most current posted data for the 2018-2019 school year for both school districts, Norristown and Wissahickon, which anybody can find online. But it was ironic because Norristown, which is 80, maybe 88% or higher free and reduced income school district, and it's on the lower end of the performing districts of the 500 school districts within the state of Pennsylvania, has 20%, roughly a little bit more, 20.8% students who are classified as special education, where Wissahickon, which is definitely more affluent, more wealthier, they also are a top 10 maybe school district within the state. I have to look up the exact numbers, and we can definitely look that up. But Wissahickon is a top 10 school district, but it's ironic because they have 18.7%. So, it's not all the way the same, but to see them above the state average of 17.3 it was definitely interesting, because we're so quick to judge people off their percentages, and the numbers are different. The enrollment is different in the two districts. But what did you think when you saw that?
When I saw the numbers, it didn't shock me. Well, it didn't. Again, it did. Because looking at it, 2 basis percentage points is pretty much on par. You could pretty much put them together and clump them together in the same category. So you will think that, hey, a more affluent area, they just probably throw more resources at it because they're collecting more taxes per student versus that one that's in the more urban areas that has more students that don't have the same property tax or allocated resources going to that particular student. So what you're looking at with those basic numbers between when you compare the 2 school districts is that 1 out of every 5 students is going to be labeled as a special educated student, regardless of what race, religion, whatever it is. So if you have 1,000 students, 200 of them are going to be labeled as special education, regardless of what ethnicity, what background, what demographics you come from. So just looking at those 2 numbers, that's one of the stifling things that I got out of it, that 1 out of every 5 students is going to be labeled as special educated.
And that's both. I mean, like you said, because if you round that 18 up, that's basically 20. Yep. So I think that was interesting. We can look at the numbers. If you're looking at the comparison of the racial breakdown for both districts, you notice how excuse me as I get this data, but in Norristown, how there is 1.6% Asian in special ed. There is 33.5% African American, 42% Latino, 8.4% multiracial, and then 14.5% Caucasian white. And then in Wissahickon, it's 15.4% Asian, which is interesting because it's like a night and day difference. Which our Norristown Asian population is not that high.
Yeah.
So it does make sense to that degree. Then if your black percent is 9.8, your Latino is 6.4, your multiracial is 6.4, and their big number is Caucasian white, which is 61.9. One thing, those are just numbers, right? And if we're looking at those statistics, we can't really reference everything on here just going off the state website, because you don't know within the classifications. There's 13 classifications: autism, deaf, blindness, emotional disturbance, other health impairments. There's a list of different things as we see here. Traumatic brain injury, which is similar to what I dealt with the concussions, right? But if you look at those deeply and they're able to break those numbers down to put the racial behind it, then you could see for each district, which I think they could do that if they chose to, but you could see for each district where the minorities are being placed in those particular districts. Because right now they're just telling you, like, hey, 61% of Wissahickon's special ed is white, but it's not telling you on here where those students are placed within their special education. And I think that would make a world of a difference. What do you think?
I think it's alarming because it goes to the stereotype or the confirmation biases of what people perceive in specific school districts. So when you think of Wissahickon, you wouldn't think that they would have the bulk majority of their students who are there. 62% of them will be white, Caucasian.
Even though they have a high percentage of Caucasians in their district, there. But for special education, you're saying, like, you wouldn't think
that would be the case that's there. Actually, it goes to show you that the minorities, because they're a smaller number, that they're pretty much outperforming when given the same resources their white counterparts in this particular one. Just going from there.
But or how about also, do you think that some of the white counterparts might know what their rights are as far as getting the certain helps and
Oh yeah,
and,
most
and
definitely.
supports.
Most
And maybe
definitely.
some of the minorities don't know that.
Yeah, most definitely. Representation with that, yeah, and getting it identified early. So with one of the things I learned in Owen J. Roberts, and I know that's not on here, but the early intervention part plays a big difference in there. So like I said, with Wissahickon being a more affluent school district than what Norristown is, they have some of those programs that they can probably afford and throw a little bit more money towards to kind of help that early intervention. And research and studies shows that, when the kids have the early intervention, they most likely perform or get back to average level. So when throwing that in there,
What are some interventions that you think were given to your child at the early age that helped him?
So before Santana even reached kindergarten, he had already had a speech therapist. 2 years prior to,
And that was through their school district?
that was through the school district and through the Chester County, because the hospital hooked up with the school district to kind of give them the pre-analysis, and then they kind of took in place. And then once Santana was able to be in kindergarten, that kind of transferred over, and O&J took the baton from there, kind of ran with it or whatever. So
easy transition for you?
easy transition for me, because we were there 100% of the way. They kind of go through everything, and we were also included in his steps to get his speech therapy up to par.
Gotcha.
And with that being said, we also was given a time frame, end result. I don't know if certain kids in certain specific school districts are given a time frame.
So they basically they set up something and said, this is where we project him to be.
Project him to be.
This is where we're going to get him to.
Yeah.
And we'll look at it at that time.
Yeah.
And make sure.
And recalculate and reevaluate him at that time. See if he still needs these programs in place for him, or whether we should continue on with them, or just modify the time frame. So I'll give you one example, case in point. When Santana was in second grade, he needed, I would say, maybe an hour a week within what they call tier time. And that's when he breaks out from his regular class. Then he goes to his special learning teacher. And then they will work on certain words, his T's, his R's, his Y's, for probably about an hour per week. But then when you look at him in third or fourth grade, it's broken down only to 15 minutes, 5 minutes. And in some cases, he might not even need to go back over and really reevaluate those words as well too. So that time frame we met every quarter to kind of readjust and adjust to see what was working, what wasn't working, and see if he needed more or less time at doing that.
Got you. And I guess just, not to go too far into O&J, because, we're talking about Norristown and Wissahickon, but for minority representation within O&J in special education, do you think it's pretty fair, pretty even from what you see in his classes, or any parents you've seen? Or?
I think it's right on par with Wissahickon.
Okay.
Where the 61% of the students probably would be white Caucasian. So just looking at Santana's class, he will probably be the only non-white person in there.
Gotcha. So that shows, like you said, there's still special education. I know one thing that we know, the label special education doesn't sit well too often within the black and brown community. We definitely understand that, or, for the black community hearing all the child in special, not everybody has that courage like y'all did to say, we don't care, let's just keep moving forth, right? Sometimes people get hooked on that label, which I understand, because you see it in prison to pipeline, school to prison pipeline, a lot of other things that can go forth. But sometimes the labels of ESL in the Latino community, not everybody likes it, even though kids sometimes have to have that. Or when you hear special education, so certain things I think that decision makers have to really look at. As you change it, because we know words matter. And how you.
It's kind of we treat it as a death sentence, and maybe it's because of the way how we handle those programs when we get those children in them. Maybe we have them in those situations, but are they really being taught to see that light at the end of the tunnel, or whatever? Like, what is the end game for having those those programs within those school districts.
One thing also, when we're looking at the Norristown and Wissahickon data, as you'll see, there's a high percentage, I'm sure this is Wissahickon, but like Wissahickon has 5.5% of their special education students are emotional disturbance, where Norristown has 10%. It's like double. This is interesting. It's very interesting. I do see high numbers of autism in both. But why I say that is sometimes we're making sure we're labeling the students, or not even labeling, giving the proper interventions to the students, because labeling is not what we want to do, but making sure that the proper interventions are being placed, because it's easy to say this child's emotionally disturbed, or, to say that everybody has a specific learning disability and not, if parents aren't engaged like you and your wife, then boom, right away people get this and this kid takes this and whatever happens, it's the reality. You get lazy when there's no accountability, and that's why we want parent engagement. It should be almost called parent accountability, not even parent engagement, because it allows the parents to hold the school accountable, the school to hold the parent accountable, and it builds a better, relationship. But it's just is unique when you look at these two schools, because you would think that the percentage would be so much different, of the students within it. But even the minority representation is basically fair. I see with Norristown, definitely we have a higher percentage of minorities in our district in general. So when you look at this and see that you have 33 plus 42 plus another 8, 80+%, you know what I mean? That makes sense, because you have almost 90% in your district. You know what I mean? That would make sense. So that's not really, it's more about looking at the classifications and seeing what are they getting labeled as. Majority of these kids, and are they getting the right interventions? Because that's you can't really say, well, it's a high percentage of black and brown kids in Norristown, especially. Well, it's gonna be. If they just pick the random kids, even with engaged parents, it will still be. But you have to make sure that you're making sure the classifications are right. Anything else you want to talk about regarding Wissahickon and Norristown comparison?
I'm just looking over the numbers right now, and so if you give Norristown has about 1,500 students that are labeled as special education, and Wissahickon, it goes back to that number I said, 1 in 5 students. So if you throw the extra 3,000 people onto Wissahickon, those numbers will still be in line with Norristown kids being in that specific range. They will actually have a little bit less, about 1,400 or whatever, versus Norristown 1,500, but you're still looking at the same total range that are in there.
And both school districts are higher than the state average in special education.
Yes.
But nobody would ever say that.
Nobody would ever say that.
You would say Wissahickon is a top performing, Norristown is what it is, Norristown is majority black, Wissahickon majority white.
Yes.
That's when we talk about racial things, and we're having those brave conversations. That's one of the articles I had to read for class. Education Leadership 2016, volume 74, number 3. It's called "Let's Talk About Race in Schools" by Rick Wormelli. I guess you say his name is Wormelli. But he has a section of his article that says brave conversations, and I think that's a important thing, talking about these conversations where, like, okay, look at these numbers are the same, and nobody would ever even know they have a high. You'll hear Norristown's higher than everybody, but you won't know how close other people are. You know what I mean? That's like yes, in sports there's no second winner, but for the understanding of data, you're like, well, Usain Bolt won 100. But the next person was a step behind him. So then there's still another person right as fast and close and whatever.
They go for what they call low-hanging fruit. Something that's easy to pick out.
So you can just say Norristown's the top. But you never say that other people have high percentages of. You would think other districts might only have 10% or something, the way they make you perceive it and everything. So, it's just good to make sure you break down data all the way and ask the right questions. There are a lot of studies out here that parents can look through online, on YouTube. What did you all do as a family as you were getting your son engaged into the special education process? What kind of research did you all do to make sure that it was right?
We actually went out and we kind of looked at different units, different programs that would probably benefit him. So I remember one of them was just the behavioral aspect of it, having a behavioral coach, because if you can't verbalize what you're trying to do, then you kind of get frustrated and then you kind of act out. One of the direct results of that was he was acting out because nobody could understand him, even though he knew what he wanted to clearly get across.
That's big.
Yeah. And just to touch upon that racial aspect of it as well too, a lot of stereotypes that I know that had went through when we were taking Santana through. They didn't know that he had an older brother who was pretty much in a high achievement course or whatever, and was excelling far and fetching beyond. I would say he's top 5% of his class of all of Roll and J. They just automatically assumed that we weren't going to be there to help and participate with that. They assumed that he should have been placed there, and that the end game wasn't for him to get out of there. That was the questions that we asked them as we were going through, just going from there. So, and to kind of stay up on it, I just think that the stereotypes or the biases of which they see through mass media and the propaganda which they read states that more likely that minority or people of color should be placed in these, not knowing that just maybe they're just hyper or going through there, or just learning the backgrounds of how people cultural views and how people act and interact with each other. I might say my kid might be just high energy, but if you've never been around a group of people before, that's just maybe how they show love to each other. Some cultures give hugs or whatever. Some cultures might see that as being offensive, and you're overstepping their boundaries. So I think that part with teachers being taught and going through a diversity training of whatever your demographics or your students are, whether it's 1% or 10%, everybody should be included in that diversity training.
Gotcha. No, that's great feedback. We're gonna wrap this up now. We're almost at our time, but this is awesome. Thank you for even coming on today and explaining your side and things you went through, looking at the data for the class, and even Dr. Ranieri giving the opportunity to look at it this way and have a different way, interviewing a parent instead of just writing it down, like just another way, because we know we're in 2019 and people like to see visuals and video and converse and you want to build that, and it's an easier learning tool for certain people. But one of the biggest suggestions I think to take from this is just to ask questions, and ask the right questions, whether you're the administrator, whether you're the teacher, whether you're the parent, even the kid. Ask the right questions, because that's the only way you're going to get the answer you need to get. You can't ask surface things. You got to ask the questions. Like, we looked at this data, and the first thing you said was, yes, you break down the racial of that school district, but you don't break down the racial of the classifications.
Yes.
So it doesn't give us a really
full broad scope
of everything.
Yes.
So just thinking of that as a total. So before we go, your last 30 seconds, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I think a large portion, and just when I'm looking at just Narsound with the numbers, that a lot of the students that are labeled here, I believe, are some of them I think a large portion of them are mislabeled, just because of, like I'm going to go back to what I said before, just the teacher interaction with people of different cultures, ethnicity, races, and things of that sort. And I think that confirmation bias gets in the way of a lot of teachings and act as a barrier for some of the teachers in the classroom. Understanding where they come from, some of the issues that they may have. Some kids might be stressed. Some kids might have to act as an adult when they go home and then come back to school, and maybe that's the reason why they're tired. Maybe that's the reason why they can't learn as much, because they're up watching their siblings while their parents work. Just to get an understanding of where the kids are coming from, where the parents are coming from, before you quick to judge, because just for interacting with our kids are bright, our kids are smart, our kids are intelligent. I just think that they're mislabeled, and it actually still happens to me as an adult. You know, people see me in my profession, and they see the long beard, they see the bald head or whatever, and they think that I'm one thing, but I'm actually totally different from what they are, without even asking or whatever. So I think when you get that bias and stereotype built into, it can kind of have a negative connotation against a group of people.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. It's a great discussion. You know, love to continue this, but we gotta cut it short now. But again, this was Ernest Hadrick here with Troy Swittenburg, but I'm in the Cabrini graduate program for my principal administration certification. This is summer session 2, 2019, the EDG 658 class led by Dr. Ranieri. Thank you and have a great day.